So I'm going to start with a reading from All Decent Animals. From the time Atta came to visit this place as a shy child, she told herself this is a place for adults. From the time them lovely maracas waves first chewed her up, when she saw teenagers dressed like big people, rich homes flashing TV style, everybody rushing, buying food, driving and eating and drinking, peacock talk flying, she promised herself she would come back to this prancy Peacock Island. But she never trusted the perfume strutting. And Trinidad never promised her anything, never once invited her. No matter how many times Atta came from her island home. Because Trinidad is a metropolis, she thought. A complicated process and a place busy keeping up with itself, carrying on at a rate, horrendous rates. Every time in the taxi from Piarco Airport to Port of Spain, she could see the mess of it right there, all along the road without shame or design, ignoring her arrival. Today, the customs man doesn't bother with her bags. He glances at Atta's mixed-race complexion. "You come back home?" he asks, just after immigration finished giving her hell for visiting the home of the greatest show on earth yet again. "Yes," she says. She does live here now. Outside the shiny, cheap-tile airport, the taxi driver has her bag. "Where you going is up a hill? Because my car is cut out on steep hill." No need to answer. Business as usual. Down the highway. Atta looks out at the familiar gaudy shopping malls and incomplete housing schemes, factories, fast food chains, mosques, the Hindu girls' school. On this island of oil with its asphalt sun and pothole roads, the highways are packed with cars crawling like shiny lice. They inch through the junction by Nestle's compound. It's midday, and diesel dark-skinned vendors comb through heat waves of glittering cars, dripping plastic bags of red pomeracs. Air-conditioned windows roll down, cool bills for hot fruit, none for the limping polio beggar with his black, cracked palm. The taxi man turns on the radio, slightly turns it up to catch the latest news, and a neutral voice offers. 4 victims were murdered in the country's latest fatality. A 7-year-old who survived by hiding under a bed reports that his father and brother were tied up while his mother and sister were brutally raped in front of them by 3 men and chopped with cutlasses. All were then shot several times. Police say. The taxi man switches off and sucks his teeth loud. Every day is some nonsense, you know. What the hell really going on in this place? As if she, the newcomer, returnee, should know the answer. He doesn't need an answer, though. Like any Trini living in Trinidad, he has had to find a way to live with the unanswered questions, the same ones that bring Atta back again and again. They pass big Indo-Greco homes with ice-and-cake concrete balustrades, lots of sliding doors, curly wrought iron, and designer features, all locked up. Patches of farmlands with Gramazone dead grass borders, and plenty of billboards. White teeth smiling Miss World, dressed in her airline uniform, waves from hers. Bright, multi-race, happy people gulp down orchard juice, cheersing each other. Trendy cricket heroes toast with Pepsi and cell phones. Rest best mattress is the best. They bypass town and the ex-railway terminal, the Sealots and Sealots shantytown stretching up to Laventille, and the Labas dump that leaks human scavengers and Kobo vultures heading over the hills. Some people don't like passing this way, you know, the driver tells Atta, 'cause of what them fellas used to do up so. I know, she says, and shifts herself to admire the northern range. There, behind Barataria, Chunapuna, and Arima, in the distance, these hills are the one to watch. Blue-gray soft in the rain season, Hard and fire-scarred in the dry season, they talk, incessant, annoying, fanning and waving and calling. They laugh, they mock the radio, echoing whatever they hear. They are part of it, she knows. Plumage of the Peacock Island. How to live with the ugliness of the beauty we love, or die with it. If you think living is difficult, try dying, Fraser had said. And that was how I entered Trinidad. That's how I came to Trinidad. And to writing with this question of how to live with the ugliness of the beauty we love. And then that brought me to the question of why writing, why art, and how does that work in a young and developing island society? So leaving art school in Europe to find an art form from this region that is relevant to here led me straight into the most beautiful mass, Minchell, to discover Mokojumbis, to Juve, and the worst mass camp also, Camp Swampy. That was in 1984. And some of this is in All Decent Animals, what I wrestle with in Carnival, and what I found out in the Carnival arts by working in it. So over the next few years, the ugly side of it began to bother me. And I'm sure you know what I'm talking about because we all see some side of it that's ugly too. The waste of it, the temporariness of it, the bought identity for 2 days. And how the consumerism and the way in which Carnival has changed to become a bikini mask that bikinis made in China. To me, that all feeds this kind of now for now attitude, a wastefulness. But what can be said in this art form though? And that it can be a most powerful and collective performance of cultural and social statement and commentary. That became part of my education. And so during that, I developed 2 things. One, an even stronger commitment to Caribbean art, and 2, a horror of being called or calling myself an artist. Because at that time, suddenly everybody was an artist. And everybody was multi-talented and full of creativity, and it must be a Trini thing, and it's God-given, and all of that. So I became really uncomfortable with the label of an artist and how artist is perceived, but also aware of the freedom that the label of the crazy artist gives to people and how this is abused or used in a conservative society. And I think Carnival gives a grace period for craziness that is well appreciated too. Thank you. So in that post-independence time in the 80s and 90s, and I believe still now, the careless celebration of anything that is we culture and we talent and we thing was happening without room for critical discussion or research, reflection, or pause, digestion. Without all of the very things that are needed for healthy growing and learning. The rush that doesn't allow time for the discussion, the research or reflection, pause or digestion. I see this as a now for now culture, which is our version, as I see it, of the American dream material rush, and one that is backfiring right now. So much done in this last minute scramble without mindfulness of the wrongdoing and wrong information that gets swept along in the rush. This continues. And the now for nowness continues to be celebrated and is part of our carnival culture. The need for changing this seems to hardly be recognized, perhaps because the results of the rushed efforts can be seen as, yeah man, looking good. Once it's looking good, even if we know it could be better, is all right. So we go on. Mediocrity, hypocrisy, and standards that are outdated or informed by an education system based on extraction instead of sustaining ourselves seems to continue to be held up and celebrated. And if we don't know what is acceptable or not, we can't agree on that or base it on a knowledge and heritage that is not just what has been written with an agenda from the past, but with conscious inquiry. If we don't know what our social contract is, we will continue breaking our societies down instead of building them and ourselves. So from working in Carnival, I apprenticed and practiced graphic art and then tried out writing. And while writing, I was able to process all of these conflicting things about where I live, being disturbed. And being disturbed is a good place to write from. But that also is what prolonged the finishing of my third novel. But what it looked like in my life, it meant that in order to write, I isolated myself. On an island like Tobago, which is where I started writing, an artist, or in Grenada, an artist might mean a visual artist or a musician. But a writer now, when you say writer, is associated with a journalist or somebody who will start telling you their story for you to write. And it's like, write my story now. It's like, that's what writers do. So I sought my other, my significant other, nature. So I wasn't really isolated. And I learned how to self-soothe through writing and being still and listening to nature's voice. So out of those bits and pieces now, which started to be poetry-like, out of this practice, then I realized, oh God, I'm writing poetry. No! And this is no offense to the young inheritors of Kaiso lyricism that so well tonight made the point of what poetry and poems, the inheritance, our form of inherited poetry can do and does, and its place in society. Thank you to both of you for demonstrating that and for making that point so clearly. My horror of the idea of poetry is from being almost an elite form, that with the best people awarded for the command of the Queen's literature and English. Meanwhile, our lyricists are not considered our indigenous poets. Their written and sung poetry is not deep enough, too contemporary or musical, crossing over into a separate genre, so spoken word should be kept over there. It's not part of our inheritance. These lyrics are not to be collected as literature of our oral traditions. So I thank you again. So to avoid that association with poetry, then I call my bits fragments. And I see them as fragments of evidence of a love affair with the ultimate other in all its forms, mostly nature. And I can see books in this way, and all forms of art in this way, and in that way enjoy the relationship that I'm in. But I know what kind of is said out there and all the talk about what I write about too. So in calling some of these fragments environmental eros, I thought, oh gosh. First people say this woman writing about sex all the time, and the first book is Buxton Spy, a tree in the, and then the second one is the sea, and now what is this? Environmental eros. So I'm not going to read one of those saucy parts, but I will read one or two of the fragments. But in thinking about my relationship with nature in this way, in love and in fear, in thinking of how we will survive as islands in the future, is how I write and practice writing outdoors. So one of these fragments, not the saucy one, comes from my little ritual every morning. The seagulls are screaming something. Whose name? What language? Hear it, heal it. My God, let me listen carefully. Translucent turquoise, clean green, and aquamarine, talking ripples telling. Two fishermen pass, breaking their way out for the day, and I feel lazy, ridiculous sitting here, indulging in talk and disconnected doing. Is it some Arawak name of a farming god the seagulls are chanting? Planting, plant, fishing, fish. This 6-year-old jetty is already too close to the water. Planks black from greater high tides, boards push loose. A strong wave slaps, shuddering pitch pine bones, my heart. Hunt lionfish, eat them, spare them, I'm told. They're devouring our reef fish out of control, out of their place, free from someone's aquarium. They have no predators here, so we must hunt them. They taste good, eat them. The fishermen won't catch them, but maybe I should. Shoot great lionfish, eat them, and write with their poison quills. This other one, I thought should be redundant by now. It's not my favorite one. I think it's kind of corny, but I thought, let me put it out there. So I put it on Facebook, and everybody liking this thing. But it shows me that we still have this same sentiment. So I will read it today. I am Caribbean, Afro, Indo, indentured, immigrant, or indigenous, the slaver and enslaved, capitalist and communist. I am all combined. I am Caribbean. And with this conflicted blood of mine, listening to the murmurs of Christian, Hindu, Muslim, Orisha, and the roar of nature, I can only claim love, and aim for unity, equity, and peace. Rise above the individual race for power and patriarchy, national hierarchy. Excel in learning and sharing, gratitude and forgiveness, to be free. To collectively move forward, upward, one day at a time, one step at a time, one Caribbean. I thought, since the beginning of after independence with the idea of CARICOM and all of that, we've gone way beyond that. But in this way, somehow in being between islands, I get a better sense of belonging in that space between islands. And even though I'm from the region, I'm always somewhat of an outsider wherever I am. Even when I was growing up in Guyana, in my home country, and that might have to do with a very unorthodox and creative education. And this made me a very keen observer, which I found out later is good for writing, but it also gave me a burdensome sense of social responsibility, of a regional sort, of that CARICOM, CSME, Dream Days type of thing. So identifying as a Caribbean, as Caribbean often makes me more of an outsider, but I'm comfortable being a Caribbeanist rather than a nationalist. The responsibility of artist and as activist and advocate was long planted in my Guyana dictatorship-informed brain and childhood. And I can see it's well established in the youths of today as well. So, reflecting now on, while writing still, on what medium and the already resourceful few who access tertiary education. Yet this form of writing is what I found out I can do, and I even enjoy it from my first love affair with reading. So the conflict continued. And thinking of the future of these islands, as the years passed, I tried all sorts of things. I schemed up all kinds of entrepreneurial ways of supporting myself as a writer and to continue writing in some form without having to resort to migration or to the advised path of teaching at a university. I saw migration as continuing the extraction problem, which my books are already contributing to, and I saw slotting into the industry of tertiary education that fuels that extraction and migration as another problem. And that's connected to the distorted and imported value of a certificate and an AC, office, shirt and tie and straightened hair, lighter skin kind of job, as that being more important than feeding ourselves or than healthy food and water. And this is I'm not dismissing in any way UWI's role or the program's role, because you have to be in it to change it. So I appreciate finding out more about how a university in a developing country and in Trinidad works in that way. But through all this, while we continue mindlessly in the rush to keep up digitally and commercially with the West in we own now for now way, is educational reform in sight though, for critical thinking skills to be introduced in primary schools? Our leaders wouldn't like that too much, you think? Is interdisciplinary and experiential education a priority? And then there's tourism and the sellout of these precious islands. The future is really not looking so bright, but I'm not a pessimist, Kevin Brown. And this is when, while I'm trying to write and complete my third novel, this sci-fi story, Naniki, jumps out of the sea at me. As if fantasy is a solution, you know? Anyway, this narrative asks me to bring it to life in a multidimensional form. At first I thought, aha, this must be digital. So I start doing things and I putting it out there online and putting all my business out there. But no, it said multidimensional, not just multimedia. And do the research, take your time, do it right, collaborate, make this serve others and the ultimate other in a way that is a real experience and one that brings people together. Well, I'm still trying to figure it out. But it's sounding like Carnival. Maybe not quite, but something that I can't run from. And something that will take a long while in the making. But being driven to create no matter what, to create some form of expression and work at it to continue to do this year after year, even if it compromises your health and your life. This is why people associate crazy with artists. But anyway, I reconciled with that one a good while ago. But I'm still distracted by the social causes and scrunting to find a way to finish my book in Grenada. While there, most people in Grenada don't know what I do. And I was fine with me. My books were being received regionally and locally by anyone who chooses or is interested in Caribbean literature and making their way in the wider world. But the connection between readers and writers, readers and readers, the conversation and the conversations and good that comes out of a collective experience with books. The bonus on top of the one that we get from the book itself. That is something I couldn't find in Grenada. I had visited the old public library with its outdated collections and civil service sullen face staff and the uncared archives to donate my books. But at least there was a national library. And then in 2011, there was none. And that wasn't no damage of a hurricane, it was neglect from the government. But that nobody publicly noticed when the library closed, and that there was no fuss or public objection, and that this continues up to now while the archives, the documented heritage of a country rots. That is even more significant and more disturbing. No repository. And this now is happening, multiply it across the Caribbean with the effects of hurricanes on libraries and museums. So I began scheming again and plotting. And this time now with some collaborators, a Pentecostal church and LGBTQ activist collective, to begin providing public access to books. So it was an experiment, first of all, working together, and an experiment because we didn't know what the response would be like. But it became a hot, little sweaty action center, all about books. And it just kept growing and growing and became the Grenada Community Library. And really it's become a community center with lots of activities after school and adult literacy, supported by ALTA, the program in Trinidad here. So while doing this, and from a distance, while I was on residency in Connecticut, and teaching at a college in Hartford. Hartford is a city that was the home of insurance in the US, where it started. And it used to be one of the richest cities in North America. Now the inner city is full of migrant populations, some of the highest unemployment rates there. The state is still one of the richest states, but the city itself is one of the poorest. So I was asked to read at a public library there. I was thinking about library and all these responsibilities and all that. So I brought up this concept, and I would like you to think about it or just want to share it here too, about the idea of cultural insurance. Because insurance, as we know, is an ancient practice that dates back to early human society and monetary economies. And it was developed to respond to monetary risks and practice by Chinese and Babylonian traders as long as the 3rd and 2nd millennium BC. And merchants would pay an extra sum for their loan to be cancelled should their shipment be lost or stolen at sea. One of the most famous examples of this is Lloyd's of London, with its list of names or underwriters, who determine the risk of a potential client and the cost of that risk to the client. So the notion of putting away a little each month, each year for yourself, or giving it to an insurance company in the form of a premium for when you need it most for emergencies, is one way of making the unknown future as secure as possible. They're some of the biggest companies still today. Storytelling, in my mind, is woven into the development and survival of our societies and is part of our coping mechanism as humans, given the unknown future we face. So as a result, stories and other art forms can be viewed, perhaps, collectively as cultural artifacts. In this way, they can be seen as cultural insurance, which means that they're able to provide comfort, relief, and hope during periods of bankruptcy, upheaval, strife, and loss. Regardless of whatever form, be it books, music, art, film, or television, the collection and documentation of cultural artifacts is the legacy and security of a people. So when a hurricane blows away more than crops and housing, and a flood washes away more than just buildings and streets, a fire leaves only traces, ash traces of lived lives, violence robs individuals of peace of mind and the ability to breathe deeply, the loss of a loved one darkens the light. So just as financial insurance helps individuals or companies get back on their feet, cultural insurance, in the form of words or images, potentially offer the same relief to a society and its members. If we are sick, we need healing. If we are scared, we seek comfort. In a crisis or emergency, cultural insurance can be there for us, giving back our integrity and self-confidence. So in this way, isn't it then possible to consider stories or art as value-added insurance? And this is done already by individuals and art collectors through private collection, but how is it capitalized on for members of the public in need? How can museums serve as insurance companies for disadvantaged or compromised populations? Is a library a bank, gathering and lending our currency back to us? Can archives become disseminators and not just curators or gatekeepers? How do all of these institutions respond to risks and emergencies? How can rich collections of cultural artifacts be used as payback? Where and when most needed? And how is it redistributed? How do community members access their cultural insurance? These questions were really meant to stimulate and challenge the stakeholders in this enterprise that we call society, particularly those involved in collection and distribution of our precious cultural artifacts. And that these artifacts might be thought of as security and used for reassurance in itself, maybe could be a way of ensuring their social relevance. So it still leaves me struggling with conflicting sort of ideas of responsibility and how writing and literature fits into the society. What difference does it make? Is it immediate enough? Or is it a very long-winded route to contributing to change? And whose responsibility is it when governments fail? And we're definitely seeing the failure of governments across the region. In fact, the the feeling of volatility, unrest, the lack of a plan, the sort of scariness of the future is pretty real, I think, across the region, especially with the climate change added to that. A friend of mine describes that as, well, you know, we build in the boat while we sail in it, because we don't really know where we're going, we just building and sailing. But I think it's maybe more like patching while we're drifting. We're drifting between the islands, and we don't really know how far that island is, what the plan is, how to get from here to there. More like we're patching and drifting. And so how are we to move forward when we're going counter to the things that need our full attention? The basic things: water, food, clean energy in an increasingly depleted world. So it feels sometimes like when you're trying to get from one island to the next. Anybody travel with Liat? And you know that feeling? And you're stuck and everything is up in the air. It's a true Liat moment. So I'm going to end this with reading a piece, a Liat story. Well, I was told it's not a story, it's a slice of life by a well-respectable writer about that feeling of just being helpless. It's called Leaving Island, If at All. The check-in lady at the counter has a way of not looking at anything other than her counter. Her eyebrows are all pencil. She ignores the loud man next in line who is entertaining everyone about Liat strikes holding the country to ransom. But is the tax is the killer, he declares, spinning back around to his audience. I don't know why the governments don't just wipe off the tax, whoops, swiping his hand. Half the ticket price gone, in fact, more than half. He checks back to see if it's his turn yet and grimaces at the check-in lady's downturned face. But the worst thing is that Liat don't even pressure governments to do that. Watch the lady bounce you off the flight, no man, somebody says. Heh, she ain't gonna do that to a charming young man like me. The man is older than the check-in lady, scrawny and kangalang looking in a weathered, working-class, local white way. He grins at the queue. But Liat is government, man. What you talking about? Somebody else says. The red-skinned man took that piece of information in stride, forward to the check-in counter. Hello, darling. The lady's penciled eyebrows raise up higher. She nods, and he slides his passport forward, grimacing again and crumpling himself at the knees. He checks his audience, nodding in the lady's direction. They chuckle. He turns his full attention back to her, leaning over the counter to see what she's doing with his passport. This one here? He nods at her again. She liked me. I could see by the lovely way she trying not to smile for me, because she want to smile. Yes, I live in Barbados, dear. I'm a true Bajan-born redlegs. He puffed up all his ropey long body. The check-in lady allows a faint smile. Laughter ripples in the queue behind him. If I tell you, he has succeeded in being able to address the people and the check-in lady at the same time. If I tell you, well, you know, and this fine lady know, but I know she ain't had nothing to do with it. I can fly to Canada for less than what they're charging people to fly from Barbados to Grenada. That's the truth. 5 years now, I can't see my daughter and grandchild because they're living in Grenada. I had to sell my car to get to this place. Are you serious? Everybody grinning, imagining the man's Rakatan car. So, it was an expensive car? The check-in lady asks, just audible enough for others to hear. No, it was a cheap car, but I had to sell it to reach here. Here you go, sir. This is your boarding pass. She shoos him from the counter by ignoring him again, but is still smiling, ever so slightly, staring at the next passenger. He starts leaving the counter, mouth still running. Now when I reach home, my son, he have to come and pick me up. I ain't had no transport no more. Poor old man like me. And the governments couldn't care less. I tell you, my friend, he suddenly rushes back to the counter. Let me ask you something. The flight on time? He doesn't give her a chance to answer, and she don't look like she will give him an answer anyway. Oh, I forget. You all don't know these things in advance. It's only after the fact. He goes off waving to his audience. It's not Liat leaving island anytime or luggage in another town. It's not that alone, you know. It's leaving island if at all. The big fat woman in the line sniffs. It's what crosses he calling Panui here today. Inside the departure lounge, Redlegs has a smartphone, so he busy swipes in now, but quiet. The seats are almost full with American Airlines and Delta flights due to leave. Even the duty-free shops have a few customers, the last of the high-season visitors. The Liat travelers stand out from the ones going far, even the black ones, because black Americans dress like tourists too, or they're comfortable in their authentic black American style. Caribbean people dress different when they're going overseas, or far across the Atlantic or beyond the Caribbean Sea. They look more prepared and eager. But when they're going on Liat, they behave as if they're going by their neighbor's house. They don't know what to expect, and it don't matter what time they reach. Patience, fed-upsy, and resignation filled up part of the terminal near the gates. You want us to spend 2.5 days in a Grenada jail? Redlegs looks up. Yes, yes. An American tourist couple barely cleared security are stuffing clothes back into their bags, shouting at each other. You want that, huh? The man asks. Yes, the woman screams, and now everyone turns to watch. She punches a bag and forces a zip, kicking another bag towards her husband, stuff tumbling out onto the floor. Yes, her voice cracks. The point when you know a child is truly hurt or a woman broken, raw as if she's been crying. Redlegs stoops softly but looks down, grumbling to his phone, glancing at them sheepishly. Everybody looks away and the man's tone changes to cradle her. Honey, come on. It's nothing, come on. He tries to lift all the bags. It is. I've never heard of something so fucking ridiculous. It's fucking shit. Will you shut up and watch your language? The man puts a bag on her shoulder and starts dragging her away from the security area. Why are you doing this, huh? Why are you trying to make me miss this flight, huh? Huh. Redlegs nods in agreement, scrubbing his head as if he's the one being harassed. The couple bump their way through to some empty seats and plop down. She tears off her handbag and dashes it onto the chair next to her, rips off a denim jacket that was hanging on one shoulder and pushes the pile away from her, disowning it. She refuses to look at her husband. Neither of them seem to care at all if anyone is watching or listening, but Redlegs is checking around the room on their behalf. The man keeps glaring at the woman and she sniffles and swipes at her hair, crosses her legs tight, staring past him. I knew it would come to this. I just knew, he mutters. Their accents are Midwest, her clothes too, and feet. In pink rubber slippers, they look rough and countryish. An elderly Caribbean woman near the couple picks up her handbag and purses her lips, ready to move. Why do you always have to make a scene? I wasn't making a scene, the woman snaps back, rocking into her seat. Whoever heard of that? They have no right. It's mine. Every place has rules, as if he's talking to a child. And you just got to live with that. Well, it's the first I've ever heard about that. What do they expect? It's 7 hours from here to Atlanta, and then she bites back some tears, still refusing to look at the man. You remember Mexico? He hisses. She tosses her head and rocks some more. You forgot that, huh? The man insists. Now the eavesdropper is sure that it's all drug-related. Redleg mutters, looking up at the ceiling. Amen. And the couple carry on making a spectacle of themselves without shame. The elderly woman stripses and shifts herself, looking to the gate. Redlegs checks the time on his watch, even though his phone is in his hand. Liat should be landing or something by now. An announcement blares out, but it's for American Airlines, and the swarm of people rise from their sweet seats. The angry American woman scowls at anyone who looks at her from the nearby group forming a queue. She seems to have calmed down a bit, but her husband continues grumbling. After a while, no one is looking at them anymore, not even Redlegs. The line to board the American flight moves along. A Liat announcement mumbles, "Flight something something will be departing at 3 p.m. Redleg scrambles to attention as it's repeated, but it is another Liat to Trinidad that's late, not his flight. He double-checks his boarding pass, strips loudly, and goes back to his phone. The American woman must have said something because her man suddenly sits forward. "No, you are not." "Yes, I am," she says. "I'm going to have a drink." She watches him now, and Redlegs is looking again too. The man's face turns red and his eyes narrow. You're not going to start that now. We have to go." He looks around desperately. "They haven't called our flight yet," she says. Catching him looking at her handbag, she grabs it before he could. "I'm going to find me a drink." Redleg winces at the word drink, and he focuses back on his phone, gripping and stabbing at it. "Lucy, no!" The American woman stood up, but the man pulls her down into the seat closer to him so quickly, it looks like she just switched seats voluntarily. He grips her arm, but she wrestles it away from him silently. The elderly Caribbean woman moves forward to her seat, to the edge of her seat, and Redlegs is up. People at the tail end of the queue for the American flight are looking. The American man is breathing hard, trying to get his woman to look into his eyes without touching her. She springs up, and he flinches. Everyone flinches, but he doesn't grab her. Redleg spins around and flops back into his chair, and the American woman flounces off to the bar without looking back. The man exhales and rubs his head forward into his hands. Leaning back, he looks at his wife disappearing among people and shakes his head, breathing hard. Redlegs trembles in rage or recognition and blinks embarrassedly at his phone. The elderly lady's mouth turns down. She looks at her hands, squeezing her purse. A wedding and an engagement ring are on her marriage finger. Her husband dead? Maybe she could tell what makes this American man so responsible for this woman. How far caring and dependency goes. But it's very plain now. Redlegs now realizes that it's past the time of his departure and no Liat in sight. He scrambles up and dodges his way through the AA passengers to the boarding pass lady. "What going on? Where Liat? Why they don't announce something, man?" "Sir, we are not Liat. I'm sure they will announce something shortly." Big strips. Redlegs knows there's nothing he can do. Returns to his seat and his phone, strips in. Some of the other Liat passengers turn down their mouths like the elderly lady. The frustrated American man stares in the direction of the bar for his wife. The Delta flight departure is announced. 3 hours have passed. "Man, this is pure shite." Redlegs jumps up and heads purposefully to an agent who is standing near the empty departure gate. The American woman passes him, scowling, and Redleg pauses, as if he's about to tell her something, but no time for that now. He demands of the agent, "You can tell me what really going on with Liat, the one for Barbados." But he spots a Liat plane on the tarmac. "Wait, that there all this time?" "That is not it, sir." "But where mine's? Mine's supposed to leave long time now and they can't tell people nothing?" "I believe they may not know the estimated arrival time, so they can't announce a departure time, but I am not a Liat representative." "Well, I know this is craziness, but this is not craziness, this is madness. You telling me they don't know if it leave one island yet, and therefore how long it's going to take to reach here? There's something called a phone, you know." Redlegs knows that whatever he says is useless. He's on Liat time now, and nothing he or any other passenger can say or do will get them from one island to the next any faster. Another hour passes. The Liat for Trinidad leaves, and only resignation waits now with the remaining passengers for the flight to Barbados. Not a representative to be seen or announcement made. Redlegs approaches the next official person who happens to pass through the lounge, accosting them on the whereabouts of Liat 514. The airport authority agent puts up his hand. "Sir, I suggest you go to the security. I ain't going to no security and go back outside to find nothing. Last time I do that, I almost get left behind. Sir, just go to the security and they will call the LIAT desk so you could speak to them. Oh, but it's still madness. He was already lurching away to the security. Why I have to call them? They're supposed to tell people something? This is why Red Legs reaches the security man. They say you will call them LIAT people for me. Security picks up a landline, dials, and hands Red Legs the receiver. Yes, I'm supposed to be on a LIAT that's supposed to leave since 1 o'clock. Where the flight and why y'all can't have the decency to tell people something? What? The LIAT lady asks him if the terminal is busy now. If it's busy? What? The plane should be on the ground any minute, sir. You can see any LIAT plane on the ground? How you mean? If I could see, I just came from, ma'am, just tell me what time the plane's supposed to depart. She asked him if he sees people boarding. Ma'am, just tell me what time, brap. The LIAT lady hangs up the phone on him, leaves him staring at it in his hand. What the, you could believe this? LIAT hung up the phone on me. Me? The woman? Security looks in the direction of the gate, and Red Legs can see his people gathering up to go. Stroops, he dashes off and boards, along with all the other grumbling, trying to be amused passengers. A weary quietness settles in the plane, with plenty sighs as it takes off, but Red Legs at the back, still trying to complain. The nice young attendant soothes him though. She revives his charming self and sweetens him into silence. He settles for obviously eavesdropping on the row just behind him. Lend me a pen, please, Mary, the Dominican man asks his colleague. Nah, nah, I do enough of them things for the day. What you call it again? Good deeds. I use up all of mine for the day. Phew. The Bajan woman kicks out her short, thick legs and presses back in her seat. Both of them talking now, low but at the same time. He can't believe she wouldn't lend him her pen, asking his male colleague next to him, and she groaning about how far the pen is down in her bag and she ain't digging for it. But the playfulness in their tone is still enough to entertain Red Legs and fellow passengers. A little more comfort shared to pass a little more time. Hey, Colin, the Bajan woman calls across the Dominican to the St. Lucian. We could get more for another workshop. We could do a next one. What do you think? Humph. Professional workshoppers, Red Legs mumbles, fighting sleep. The colleagues discuss the idea. Despite the poor participation in their completed work in Grenada, the funds are there, so they might as well apply again. And in St. Lucia, they know so-and-so, and in Dominica, Alan will organize. They plan their inter-island careers and paper pusher reports, while LIAT passengers doze and Red Legs snores loudly. Thank you. So I would like to give thanks now to the university, first of all, for inviting me for this residency, to Head of Department, Dr. Marit Ford, and to Dr. Muli Amai. It's been an amazing experience so far. It's the first time I'm reconnecting, or connecting really, with writing and writers in Trinidad since I began writing. So from the readings at the lunchtime, Campus Lit Week, this all week, and the interchange and exchange and sharing and feedback reading with the students' work, I want to say thank you especially to San Marco Lightburn for hosting the whole week really well, and for the MC and Naja as well, and Chanel Cupid. It's been really, really wonderful meeting so many varied voices and writing that I think is capturing the Trinidad storytelling natural ability onto the page, and with all its complexity and all of its challenges. So it's really, really been a privilege and an honor for me to participate and to have access to that. and to share this residency too with the two writers from Dominica, Celia and Lisa. It's been wonderful getting to know you a bit more, and I hope to keep in touch, and just that it becomes a more cross-Caribbean exchange and experience this way. I know you've given a lot to the program as well. So thank you everyone once again. Thank you for coming out this afternoon and for staying on to hear this. Thank you.